The snowstorm had swallowed the mountain whole when everything went wrong. The sky roared with a violent fury, the kind that made even the bravest feel helpless, and the helicopter's tail had already begun to burn. Inside the wreckage, a young woman with trembling hands and blood on her forehead pushed against the shattered door, begging the men outside to run before the flames reached the fuel tank. Her voice cracked with terror as she shouted for him to leave her behind, to choose life over a stranger trapped in a broken machine. But the man, exhausted, frostbitten, and carrying the weight of his own struggles, stood frozen for a heartbeat, knowing that one decision in that moment could mark him forever. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of good people doing brave things, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Your support means more than you know. The billionaire girl's name was Serafina Vale, daughter of the reclusive tech magnate who practically owned half the valley below. She had grown up amidst privilege but also profound loneliness, raised by nannies and guarded by bodyguards, yet barely seen by her own father. She had flown to the mountains that day to escape a world where everything looked perfect but nothing ever felt real. She never expected the helicopter to malfunction midair. She never expected to crash into the snow with flames licking toward her feet. And she definitely never expected a stranger, an ordinary man with nothing left to lose, to appear through the storm and risk everything for her. That stranger was Marcus Hale, a tired single dad from the nearby town of Briar Ridge. He had hiked into the mountains searching for a small wooden box his daughter once buried during happier days. His little girl, Aria, was gone now, taken by a sudden illness that shattered Marcus's world, and he carried, every day, the unbearable ache of a father with empty arms. He had promised himself he would visit her favorite mountain spot once a year. But as the blizzard worsened, he had begun to regret being there at all, until he heard the deafening explosion of metal hitting the ground. Marcus didn't think. He simply ran. Snow tore at his boots, the wind stung his face, and yet all he saw was the wreckage burning ahead and a figure trapped inside screaming for help. He had no tools, no training, and no guarantees. Only the instinct that he could not let another life slip away while he stood by powerless. Serafina had shouted at him to leave her. Flames were rising like the breath of a dragon at her back, and the heat made the snow hiss and melt beneath the metal frame. She believed she was seconds from death. She believed that no one would come for her. After all, she had spent years surrounded by people who only wanted her last name, not her heartbeat. She couldn't understand why this stranger refused to run. Marcus forced open the damaged door with frozen hands that were already bleeding from the jagged metal. Every movement hurt, every second felt stolen. The fire crackled louder each moment, and the walls of the helicopter creaked like they were about to collapse. Inside, Serafina struggled weakly, tears burning in her eyes as she insisted he didn't owe her anything, that she was only going to slow him down. But Marcus remembered Aria's last words, words he had never repeated to anyone: "Daddy, promise me you'll help people who are scared." That memory cut through the storm more clearly than the flames. He lifted Serafina into his arms despite her protests. She was shaking violently from cold and fear, and the elegant red dress she had worn for her solo retreat was torn and smeared with soot. Marcus trudged through the snow, half carrying and half dragging her away from the wreck just as a booming fireball erupted behind them, painting the sky with orange and gold. The shockwave hit them hard enough to throw them to the ground. Serafina clung to him instinctively, her breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps, and for a moment neither spoke. The mountain was silent again, except for the sound of two broken people realizing they had survived. Marcus didn't leave her alone after that. He helped her build a shelter beneath a cluster of boulders, wrapping his own coat around her even though the cold gnawed at his bones. As hours passed and the storm raged on, Serafina learned that this man who had saved her life lived in a small rented room, worked long shifts at a hardware store, and carried a grief so deep she could feel it even in the way he stared into the distance. He didn't brag, didn't complain, didn't pretend to be strong, he simply tried to keep her warm, fed, and alive. And for the first time in her life, Serafina felt seen not as a billionaire, not as a privilege or a headline, but as a human being shaking in the snow beside another human being. She felt guilt for every time she had ignored the silent battles of the people around her. She felt a strange tenderness toward this man who had given up his safety for her without expecting anything in return. When rescue finally arrived at dawn, Serafina refused to leave the mountain until Marcus was safely on the helicopter beside her. She held his arm tightly, terrified that he would disappear the moment help arrived, the way most people did after touching the edges of her life. Later, At the hospital, when she learned that Marcus had frostbite on both hands, she quietly cried in the hallway, realizing he had paid a price for saving her. The days that followed changed everything. Serafina visited him, thanked him, offered to pay for treatment, to buy him a new home, to give him anything he wanted, but Marcus always said the same thing: he wanted nothing except the chance to honor his daughter by helping others. And it was in that humility, in that quiet strength, that Serafina found a purpose she had long forgotten she needed. She began funding mountain rescue teams, supporting single parents in Briar Ridge, and inviting Marcus to help her design programs that could truly make a difference. He didn't become her employee. He became her friend. Someone who reminded her to stay grounded. Someone she reminded to keep healing. And both discovered that sometimes, life breaks you only to rebuild you into someone stronger, kinder, and more courageous. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Your support helps us keep spreading hope. Just before you reach the end, comment below, what would you have done if you were in Marcus's place? And remember, sometimes one brave decision can change not only a life, but two.